Thank you. Okay, welcome to our talk about how to build ultimate custom control UI5 library. Just a few words to us two. My name is Daniel, this is Sebastian. We are both software engineers in the field of UI5 development, both with 2.5 year experience, so not too much, but a bit of experience. A few words to Savanta. Again, like mentioned, we are a pretty design-driven company, so everything we make is first designed before we start developing. I think this clears a lot of the topics I will explain in this talk. Yes, Savanta has experience in UI5 since 2013, so quite a years. Okay, and without further ado, let's start with our agenda. What will I show today? At first, I will start which pain points we had with our first library project. Then what we learned out of this first pain we had with our first project, what we did for the future or the next libraries we developed, what we did improve. Which white label strategies we followed for these new libraries. And then again, we will show some of the in-house tooling we developed to ease the development of UI5 libraries. And at the end, we will show our Demokit extension for better documentation of our libraries. So what you should know to follow the talk is you should know how to develop controls in UI5. I assume every one of you knows how this is done, and basic styling knowledge like less and so on. So let me start. Why did we start with custom control libraries? Why did we even start this one and not just use plain UI5 from SAP? Like everything, it started with one customer, a big customer that had multiple applications ordered from us, and we just started inside the applications to develop. Our designers designed the applications, and we just hit the keyboard and started. And as you can assume, we needed some custom controls inside the application because some special use cases were hidden, and we needed to adapt to them with new controls. And in each application there was one custom control or another custom control, and so all custom controls were developed inside the applications. And sooner or later we needed one custom control out of one application into another, so we took the code, copy and pasted it into the new application project, and so it began. We had a lot of code duplicated between these projects, and it was really hard to maintain this. So if we needed to make some adjustments to a control, we needed to do this in several places. And yeah, the next step was, okay, why don't we just copy all this code or extract it out of the applications and put it in one central place, so in one library project. So our first library was born, and we clustered just the code of the applications custom controls into one library project. So we had the first improvement. We didn't need to copy the code around, but we had one central code base, so this was better than before. And the second one was we needed to make heavy adjustments to some controls because our customer had an own style guide, so we couldn't just go with the standard Fiori design and the standard controls. We needed some more styling for this, but it was easier to have this all in one place. So, and like I mentioned, we had several issues with this first library project. We had began with just copying the code out of the applications into the library project, and yeah, because the controls were originally developed inside the applications, it was not really clean cut between control logic and business logic of the applications, and this followed into the library, of course. So we had a dependency from the library into the applications, and not the other way around. So our library code depended on the application code. So this was not really a good way to reuse this library code in further application projects. Another point was, because we copied the code around, it was not really thought through when we developed a control. All controls were developer-driven, so the developer just decided, okay, I need a new control for this specific requirement of my application, and he started coding this. And because of this, he didn't really make decisions so the control was reusable in other use cases. He just concentrated on his one use case. So we had not really flexible controls. We had the problem, we had several variants of basically the same control. The button control is always the easiest example. So in one application, we needed an extended button. In another application, we needed an extended light button. So we had two controls that basically did the same. They just looked different. And in our library, we now had also a button and a light button. So we couldn't just merge them. So all these dependencies between the applications and the library projects was a really problem for us. We couldn't really expand on this library project. Another thing we had, we couldn't we had a concept in place to extend on the theming, so we couldn't just take this library logic and put another theming for another customer on this. Even if the logic stays the same, the look is for a new customer, maybe another one. Yeah, and the last point that came as time progressed, new UI5 library versions were released. So we started with UI5 1.32 at the time, and sooner or later we needed to migrate to 1.38 for our customer, and we hadn't done concept in place to ensure our controls were running on 1.32 and 1.38 simultaneously, because some applications remained on 1.32. So I think this quote really catches our situation. We had a lot of education. We came through with this library project. So the value of a prototype is in education it gives you, but in the code itself really fits to our situation. We couldn't go on with the code base. We just copied together, more or less, but we learned a lot. So we started our first new library project. Before we started, we rethink what did we learn and how could we make it better in the future. So our first point was, before we start developing, we need to design all the controls at first. We can't just start developing with our code. We need at first we need the design to be finished, so we know how the control should look, how it should behave, and how it is used inside applications. So all this will go into our own design system, or style guide, like we call it. I will explain this on the next slide. After we had the design finished, we didn't really start developing. First we planned how the control should be, how the control could be developed. So the first thing is we looked into the SAP M and SAP UI core libraries and decided, is there a control that is very similar to our requirements we have. My favorite example is the list control of the SAP M library. The list control is a really rich control. It has a lot of logic inside of it. We can reuse selection modes. You can, you know how it is. And the control is really well developed from SAP side, so we can just base our control, our list control, on this code base of SAP. So we looked if we can extend an SAP control. if possible. If it was not possible because our requirements were really different than everything in SAP code is, then we started from scratch, of course. Okay, and when we defined our base control, we go on and define which properties do we need, which events are needed, which aggregations are needed. All this is defined before we really start coding, so no code is written until all these points are clarified. If all this is clarified, we start developing. And while developing, we have a lot of things learned from our previous project. So we learned that we need to encapsulate our code, so our styling and our logic doesn't bleed through to the Fiori controls. If we need some Fiori controls side by side or in a Launchpad environment, we have some Fiori application and some custom applications with our library. So there should be no side effects between all these applications and code. Yes, next thing is build lightweight controls. This is not always the easy one because a lot of controls are basically the same and they have a lot of features in it, but we try to keep our controls as basic as possible without sacrificing our features. Yeah, and we, like I mentioned before, we learned we need to avoid dependencies to other controls or even applications. Application dependency is no-go in our control libraries, but even the dependencies to other controls should be as less as possible. Yeah, a few words to our design systems. As I mentioned, we started with one big customer. Today we have a lot of libraries developed at Savanta, and we also have our own design system for our internal and external projects. Our shape design system, this is our shape product, so to call. Inside such a design system, there is a lot more than just fancy pictures and some animations or something like this. The design system describes everything. Application development and control development teams should know about the design system. So not just a color theme, but also how does the user interact with the control? How is the control used inside applications? What UX patterns are used inside applications? And all this stuff, also stuff like accessibility and how can we transport the brand values for our customers inside their applications. All this stuff is described in a really big document or documentation, and our application developers and our library developers can always go back to this document and read what the requirements are. Of course, there are a lot of pictures too. Yeah, and our technical demands on UI5 libraries also where we need to coexist with standard UI5. So, like I said, no side effects if it is run side by side. If we use a sub-M list and a custom list of ours side by side, there should not be some bleed through in the styling and in the logic. Yeah, then we had the requirements that we can easily white label our library theming for new customers. So if a new customer arises, we really need a system in place where we can just say, okay, you have a new color theme, you have some new icons, you have a new font or something like this, but the control stays the same, so the functionality is the same, but the library will look exactly like your design system describes. So we needed a system in place where we can easily extend our customer base with new themes. Yeah. Then again, we needed some development tools to easily start developing new controls, to easily onboard new colleagues into the project if they arrive, and just to not have too much work around, but just go and start coding your control logic and your control styling. Then we needed a really good documentation, not just the documentation we have here in the design system. This is for us internally to know how to develop applications and libraries, but we needed a documentation how to use our library. which properties are in place, which public methods are in place, which aggregations are there, and so on. So we did this. We will show this at the end, how we did this. And the last point is we didn't need to reinvent the wheel. So if there is something in place in this OpenUI5 code base, we didn't need to duplicate this in our own way in implementing this. So we needed to know what features are in place in OpenUI5, and we use this feature. So we don't duplicate code, and we rely on really good tested code of OpenUI5. So some words to the theme and white labeling approach we choose for our libraries for now. Just a really high-level view on our setup. So we choose from the theme designer the Fiori styling we exported, so all the less files, and we have our own base theme that is based onto the Fiori design, and inside this base theme, everything is defined. So all layout, all colors, all fonts are all for the base theme defined in this one project. So this is one project. This gray rectangle is one theming project we develop. So everything that is tightly coupled to a control is inside this, and then we have here one customer theme in this slide, but we could have multiple customer themes, all depending onto this one base theme. And all we need to do is make some adjustments for color codes inside this customer theme, and then we are good to go. We can just compile our less, and our library will look just as this one customer needs it. So finally, some code. After a lot of words, there is one big file in our base theme that is basically just, that is basically just a definition of color codes and some more stuff like the font definitions, but basically it's just the color codes and some comments inside there, so we can easily see the semantic meaning of one color code. That's just one inline comment for us. So we define a list of color codes inside this one file. This is residing in our base theme, and then we have for each control of us, we have at the right side, you can see it, we have one less file where all our selectors are in, where all our less code is inside, and as you can see on the top of the right side, we reuse or we reassign our color definitions from the one big file to local variables in less, and then we use these variables down in the actual CSS rules to style our controls. So we have a mapping from our local variables to our global variables. This is our base theme. And then in our customer theme, this is now our customer theme, we have also such a file that defines all the colors for this specific customer. And then we have on the left side here an additional file where we just map the customer colors to our base colors. So we just override the variables of our base theme with the customer colors. And this enables us to just compile the code with the new color codes of the specific customer. So for example, when I go back to the previous slide, at the right top you can see I assigned the base 1 color to the additional icon background color local variable. And now after our mapping in base 1, there is the color code of the customer 1 color code. So we don't need to touch the base theme if we onboard a new customer theme. Yeah, and if a customer has some special needs, so I made up some silly example here. Our customer demands that our badge is rotating when we hover over it. So this is just one customer that needs this feature. All other customers don't want this feature, so we can just go on in our customer theme and add additional styling to our controls without having effect on the base theme or on other customer themes. Yeah, and at last, like I said before, we really need to have in place that our styling does not bleed into the standard Fiori design. And this is just the setup we have in each control. So on the left side, you see a control.js file, so some basic control here. And each control of ours has this at least one basic base CSS class we add onto this control, and we namespace and encapsulate every CSS selector we use with at least this one CSS class. So all the styling here is inside the base class, and this ensures that all our styling is just for our controls and not just for the sub-M list control, for example, in this case. Yeah, thank you, and now Sebastian will take over with this tooling part.
So, now that we heard something about the white labeling, I want to show you something about our tooling we use to speed up the development of our controls. So our tooling is split in two parts. The first one is the tooling we use while building the library. This is currently grunt-based, but is shifting over to the UI5 CLI, new UI5 CLI part by part. Currently, we don't have done it for everything. The tooling has several parts. The first part is to sync the theme files with the controls in the library. So when we create a new control, we have to make sure that there's also a theming file for it, so that we can encapsulate this code from the other controls. The second one is to update our control samples. So we have some samples for our control with a description file, which sample belongs to which control. So this can automatically be mapped for the whole library. Then we have a task for registering our icon font. Whoever used a custom icon font in UI5 knows the struggle of registering every glyph in the icon pool with an add icon. And we automated that for our icon font because it gets updated very frequently. The next thing is we update our test suite automatically. So every test file that's in our test folders will be added to this test suite so that we don't have to do it manually. And the last two parts are new with the new UI5 tooling. First off, we run the UI5 tooling, so we make sure the library is currently building, we don't have any errors in it, and also that we can use it after that. And the last one is an NPM deployment, so our internal library we did publish to our private NPM repository, but we can replace this with every NPM repository publicly or private for the customers. The second part of our tooling is for the developers to assist the control development. Those are 4 tasks that are there. We have the add control task. You can see the hierarchy of the controls added on the right side. So first we add a skeleton for an UI5 control, where we have a template for that. The second one is we create a default sample for that control so that the developer can easily start coding for the control and not have to do some setup for his test environment. The third one is we add a default unit test and also the control-less file via the build tooling. The second task we have in there is the add sample. So let's imagine the list. It has very many variants of itself that doesn't all fit in one sample. So we can add another sample for the selection modes, for the growing enablement, and so on. The next one is we can add a unit test, the same as with the list. Maybe we have controls that are bigger, that need more complex unit tests, so we can cluster them. And the last one is the delete control task. This assists the developer to really delete every part of a control. Maybe had a typo while creating, or later we noticed we don't need that anymore. So with this task, we can make sure that every file that's specific for this control will be deleted, so that there is no leftover that's bloating up the library and laying there forever, and nobody noticed that it's never used. So how do we integrate the UI5 tooling in there? That's pretty easy. We have a root project with many submodules, real Git submodules, and in the root project we have the UI5 YAML, and also in the control library, in themes for each customer, there's a UI5 YAML, so they're independent UI5 project, so that when we want to ship for customer Y, we only have to ship him the library and the theme, because they're both independent, and while building, they're declaring their dependencies and resolving them. The thing why we have a root project in there is just because development-wise, with the root project we can say, okay, we have this root project, there's everything we need for the development. So when we start the UI5 tooling there, all the dependencies for all libraries and themes get resolved, and we can work in this one place. So all that I've told you now, I want to show you. At first, we want to start with the control development. We have this awesome library, and I want to add a new control. This is, again, it's a cron task, add control. We want to name this cube. It asks us for a sub namespace to better structure our libraries, but we don't need that for now. As you can see, it's now running the UI5 tooling. And when we now have a look inside the control library source, we can now find the cube.js, and it already has some things in there. So it's, as Daniel mentioned, it has this base class for my control library cube. So, and this is added to the control itself, so that it's definitely encapsulated, that we don't miss on that. And I've prepared the code for that. Let me just copy over that. Here we have just added a renderer with several diffs for each side. And now we are doing this also for the cube-less files, first for the base theme. In the base theme we have pretty much code in there. So there are many animations and animations over animations, and some CSS. And at the top you can see the mapping. And I can make this a bit bigger or not. Okay. There you can see the mapping. It's currently the animation duration is there with 2 seconds. We have the background color, and we have the outline color, which is 2 pixels and some variables from the color definition. So when we now go over to the cube-less for the customer and copy over that code, we can see that there's currently really nothing in there. It's an import statement that's in for every control, so that inside less we can resolve the variables, but nothing is in there currently. So let's see how it looks when we start developing. We run npm run serve. This will start the normal UI5 tooling server. Every project of these is looking like this. So we have no custom tasks currently in there. It's only the normal UI5 serving. And in here we have the dependency declared for the 3 submodules. There's nothing special with this. When we open this, we get here. Normally the samples are located in the test resources folder under Demokit sample. And there we have it, the newly created cube sample. We run the test HTML we have in there, and we can see the spinning cube. It's blue with a red outline, that are the customer colors. And as Daniel mentioned, we can just change to the customer theme and take over the customer variables for these colors. Yeah, it's fast and not really looking good because we only have red in here. So the customer said, yeah, the first thing we want to change is it's spinning too slow or too fast. We want to spin it a bit slower. So we changed the animation duration. It's now a bit slow, but you can't really see the cube inside without a border in there. So we changed the custom colors, and here we have the base 13 that got translated to customer 13, but now in the less we will just overwrite this variable with the customer 19, which is another color. And when we reload the page here, we will see a red cube with the blue border. And that's all it takes to change these things. I will show you another sample that's more to what we really did, not spinning cubes. This is the badge, and as Daniel mentioned before, the customer had the funny idea of the spinning badge when we hover. So when we change it, first the color changes, but also we have this little spinning animation, so we can do even bigger changes to controls only for specific customers. So that's it for the development tooling. The next thing I want to show you is our documentation or our custom Demokit. And we thought about how can we document our controls. Yeah, we have JSDoc. Everyone could go into the code and look it up himself, but that's not really usable when someone is not working with the library. We could extract it and paste it into a default JSDoc template and upload that anywhere. That would also be good. But what is better than providing a documentation developers are used to? Because we are UI5 developers, UI5 has a pretty good documentation with the Demokit, and even better with the Demokit v2. And with the v2 version, we also we catched up and said, okay, come, let's try to extend it. So what did we? We hooked into the UI5 Demokit and brought our own library in there, our samples, our library, all our code. We also provide, with these custom samples, the theme change, so we can go to the Demokit and show the customer what changed from our basic theme, what have we done to match his needs for showing this. And also, whoever worked, again, with icons, they're a pain, to find out which icon uses which icon code and then find out which reference we put in for the icon in code to look that up. That's really not very nice. So we also extended the icon explorer and put in our own icon font. I will show you this also. I've already built this because of the JSDoc task is taking really some time to analyze all the dependencies, and to show that we not only have dependencies to our own library, so we don't want to only document our own library, but we also put in the dependencies for the OpenUI5 library so that we have in place the right documentation for version 1.52 in this case with our own library, so that you have this all in one place. I will now start a normal web server in the dist folder. There's nothing special in there, and open the index.html and we can see it. It's the normal UI5 Demokit. We have the documentation, we have the API references, and also we can go into the sub button. API reference is all there, but beside that we have the my control doc library, and in there there's also the newly created cube. This has no real documentation currently because it has no interface, but let's look at the button. We have this button with its properties, with its press event, and all the generated methods from it. Also, we have links to our own enumerations for the button properties and can click on them and they are documented. Beside that, we can also go to the control samples. So we have the button and this is loaded properly. And here we can switch to the customer theme, which has the different colors. And to show you that we can coexist, I want to open the button sample here, and the normal UI5 button is working out of the box. So in a Launchpad landscape, there would be no side effect to any Fiori application that's currently running. The last thing is the icon explorer. Here you can just go in, look for my control library as a tag, and select it. And now you can see all the icons that are coming from the library icon font and their Unicode and descriptions. So to summarize it up, what have we shown? We've shown our architecture, the development process. So first we design the controls, then we go into designing the API for the controls, and then we start developing. We've showed our white labeling concept with inheritance of theming, the supported build tooling, and last but not least, our Demokit to document our libraries. Thank you for your attention. I hope you had fun with the talk. You've learned something from our learnings.